Welcome to Driven by Dreams. Today's guest is Brian Lofrumento, a lifelong entrepreneur who launched his first business at just 19 and never looked back. Since then, he's launched, grown, sold, closed, advised, and invested in businesses across industries, and all with different business models. Now he's host of one of the top business podcasts in the world, the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast, with over 1,000 episodes and counting. Outside of his business portfolio, he's also the founder of Through Entrepreneurship, a nonprofit that makes entrepreneurship more accessible for everyone so that more solutions, more innovation, more growth, and more opportunities can happen for individuals, communities, and society through entrepreneurship. There's so much we can learn from Brian's journey, so let's jump right in. Hi Brian, it's great to have you here.
Hey Nishka, it is so great to be here. I'm so grateful for the invite and excited for this.
Thank you so much for coming. Well, could you share a bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So actually, I resonate and relate so much to your own personal story, which is why I was so excited when you reached out. I started my first business when I was a teenager as well. So it was the summer after my freshman year of college. I was 19 years old. And to be honest with you, academics were coming a little bit easy for me in college. I had a 3.98 GPA after freshman year, and I was playing a lot of video games. I was playing a lot of soccer, a lot of ultimate frisbee. And so that summer I did some introspection and I said, how can I use my time a little bit more wisely? And so I always loved soccer, and I always loved writing, and I always loved the internet growing up as a millennial. So I started writing about soccer on the internet. I started a soccer blog that summer, and by junior year of college, it grew to one of the most read soccer websites in the world. We had 3.5 million people from all over the world coming to our website every single month, reading our news. I had 20 people working with me, and so it was a really cool entrepreneurial startup. And then when I graduated college, I started a marketing agency to help other businesses with their internet marketing and how to grow their traffic online as well. One thing led to another. In 2015, I published a book with so many more of my entrepreneurial lessons and findings and strategies and mindset stuff that I picked up along the way. And that book was called Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur, all about going from wanting to be an entrepreneur to actually becoming one. And then fast forward a year later, and I launched the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. And we are 9 years into that podcast journey, over 1,100 episodes. And it's really fun just interacting with incredible entrepreneurs such as yourself, Anishka. So really glad to be here and share more of that.
Well, thank you. That's amazing how you started that when you were a teenager. What were some of the challenges you faced when starting that?
Yeah, for sure. So that was back in 2008. So times have changed a lot. Gosh, do I wish we had ChatGPT when I had started that soccer blog in 2008, but we didn't. And to be honest with you, actually, even the web wasn't as mature as it is today. A lot of web development stuff that comes easy with Squarespace or with any website builder these days, it wasn't so easy back in 2008. So there were some very big tech hurdles that I had to learn. I majored in economics and finance in college. I was not a CS major. I didn't know how to code at that time, so I had to learn things the good old-fashioned way, which back in 2008 meant going to the library and checking out some books and ordering some books on Amazon at the time. And so tech challenges were really the biggest thing, and I was programming in CSS and HTML and PHP, and I had to learn all of those things inside of WordPress. They didn't have all the plugins that people have today, and so that was for sure one of my biggest challenges. But in hindsight, Anishka, truth be told, anytime I saw challenges back then, and even still to this day, I realized, well, those challenges, the hurdles that I'm facing, those are the ones that are going to keep other people from doing this. I'm more willing than most to go through those hurdles and challenges, and so that ultimately became one of my biggest differentiators, is that we just moved fast and we learned things and we tried things and we put things out into the world.
How did you get that willingness? I mean, most teens aren't ready to usually start businesses, so...
Yeah, for sure. I attribute a lot of it. So I come from an immigrant family. So my mom's family immigrated to the United States from Albania. And so even as a young kid, that immigrant mindset had been instilled in me because my mom always talked about how difficult it was for her family to come to the United States. They didn't speak English when they moved here. English is my mom's fifth language. And so coming to the United States, education wasn't an open door for them because they didn't speak the language and they didn't have ESL classes like so many people are fortunate enough to have today. And so my mom and all of her siblings, my aunts and uncles, they all had to forge their own path and really dig in and go through those hurdles. And so it was a constant reminder to me ever since I was a young kid of my mom saying, look, you guys have it easy. You have way more opportunities than we had. And so that always has been the drive for me to say, wait, hold on. everything that I have is a blessing. Everything that I have is an opportunity for me to have something more, because my mom's family went through so many hardships to come to this country to create opportunities for my generation, being first generation American kids. And so all of that stuff was instilled really into that mindset.
My parents always talk about that too. They're like, we have so many things now, chat GPT and AI, and yeah, we're able to do so much more than they could do back then. So looking back at that first business, what were some things that you learned that you still carry with you today?
Yeah, for sure. The biggest one, it's funny because by day I was sitting in college classrooms and listening to college professors teach me about business, but by evening I was in my dorm room behind my laptop actually running and building a real life business. And so there was a bit of a disconnect for me at the time where my college professors were talking about competition and you really have to stand out and you have to find your unique selling proposition and you have to do SWOT analyses and all of these things from a textbook perspective. But then by evening, I didn't know what I was doing. And so I was actually reaching out to my biggest competitors, fellow soccer website owners and other media company owners. And I was saying, hey, I'm Brian. I'm 19 years old. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm really passionate and I love putting the work in and I'm figuring this out. I'd love to hop on. It was Skype at the time to date myself. And I would say I would love to hop on Skype and just learn from you and just hear about your experience. And because I was so young, I knew that that was one of the things that I was using to my advantage is everybody likes to help younger entrepreneurs. And so at that time, all of my competitors were so generous in what they were sharing. And a big part is they actually let me write on their website. So I was writing articles and publishing those articles on their websites, which were far more established and way more polished than my website was. And so at the bottom, they always let me link back to my website. So it always said, Brian Lofrumento is an author at premiershiptalk.com. Here's the link to his website if you want to read more of his work. And that really stuck with me. All those people that really taught me the abundance mindset, that everybody has the ability to win. And that's why one of my founding mottos behind my podcast is a rising tide lifts all boats. And that's because I really learned all the way back then at 19 years old that when you win and you bring others with you, there's so much room for literally everybody to win together.
You mentioned that being younger is an advantage, but a lot of young entrepreneurs don't have that confidence. So where did your confidence come from? And did you have to build it over time?
Yeah, that's a really good question and a really important point because I agree with you. To be honest, I didn't have that confidence built in because there were a lot of things working against me. First, I kind of felt like an imposter just because I was young. Second, my business, my soccer website, focused on the English Premier League. And so in the world of English soccer, American accents are a little bit frowned upon. And so anytime I was interviewing players or going to press conferences or on the side of the field, because I had media passes at that time, a lot of people, when they heard my accent, were just like, oh, he's not even English, he's American. Like, what does he possibly know about soccer? And so a lot of that stuff was, I just played to my strengths. And so I've always been a really talented and a really strong writer. And so I leaned a lot on writing because when you write, nobody knows your age, nobody knows your accent, nobody knows where you're from or where you live. And so I recognized that as one of my unique powers. And I knew that if I could get people to read my writings and respect me on the merits of what it was that I was putting into the world, then by the time they ever got on the phone with me or met with me in real life, sure, they would be surprised, but I had already built a body of work that they knew and they trusted and they really respected, and that's what I leaned on, was that merit rather than me getting inside my own head for all the reasons why people wouldn't take me seriously, and sometimes they didn't, but I just really found the confidence inside of my skills and inside of my strengths.
I was not very confident when I started out my podcast, and I was like, I don't think people will take me seriously because they're much older than me and I'm 14. But I guess you already had that confidence when you started your podcast, right? Or was it different then?
Yeah, here's the way I'll answer that, Anishka, and I'm sure that you have found it as well. And you've got 30 or however many episodes at this point. By the time I started my podcast, so that was in 2016, so I had already been an entrepreneur for 8 years. But the truth is, every single new thing we start, we have those internal questions. We face imposter syndrome. It's a natural part of any element of building or starting something new. And really what I had just learned by 2016 and why I didn't even think about needing confidence when I started my podcast, was I just had this very strong acceptance of I'm only going to get better at this. So I'll never forget the night in 2016. It was a beautiful fall night in New England in 2016 when I sat down to record episode 0. And episode 0, I intentionally labeled it as that because I was like, it's not episode 1 just yet because I don't know what the show is about. I'm just going to hit record and share things. And the deal that I made with myself that night was my first episode, the first thing that I sit down to record, it's going to be my worst. It's absolutely guaranteed. I'm only going to get better every single time I sat behind the microphone. And so that's the promise that I made to myself. And the other promise that I made was I'm not just going to record this and see if I'm good at it, yes or no. I'm going to do it 100 times. And in the span of 100 times, I'll figure out if I'm getting better. I'll figure out if I enjoy it. I'll figure out if there's something to this. And so that's the promise that I made is I'm just going to do it 100 times. Inevitably, I'll get better just through practice and through repetitions. And that's what I leaned on more so than looking for any sort of confidence that I may or may not have had at the time.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Did your podcast start as a side hustle or did you commit to it full time when you started?
Yeah, so my podcast, the way I'll answer that is I was already a full-time entrepreneur at that point. And so I was selling online courses and I was working on my book at that time. And so I had other entrepreneurial ventures. So I was full-time committed to entrepreneurship, but my podcast was just one part of my business ecosystem. And so a lot of people in the world of marketing, they obviously talk about top of funnel and lead generation and all of that. So I really viewed my podcast as just one part of my marketing mix. So it wasn't until many years later, gaining audience traction, gaining fame, or not fame per se, but obviously rankings. Fame equals rankings in the podcasting world. And when I saw that we were consistently ranking in the top 200 in the top podcast charts in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and Australia, and over 150 countries around the world, that's when I realized, wait a second, this doesn't have to be a one-man show. I can hire a team, and we can have a post-production team, and we can have a pre-production team that sources guests, and we can have amazing entrepreneurs on. So it's definitely been an evolution, and it started just as that one little piece of my marketing mix.
It must have been harder to start your podcast, right? Since you mentioned that with your book, people couldn't judge you behind your writing. So how was it like?
Yeah, I'd actually say that the book really helped the podcast launch. So like I said, I published the book in 2015, and that was just out of something that I knew it was living inside of me. Obviously, I've always loved writing. It's such a common theme, even in what you and I are talking about here today. So I wrote the book really over the span of 2 weeks, and I just published it on Amazon. And because I knew a lot about search engine optimization, people were finding it, and I was getting sales, and also I was running Facebook ads at the time, and I was promoting it on social media. And so people all over the world, people who I knew, but especially strangers, were buying the book and reading the book and reaching out to me. I've always been very public with my email address. It's hello@imetbrian.com. Now that people have met me on your show, hello@imetbrian.com. And so people were seeing that email address in the book, and they were reaching out to me. And so Anishka, the craziest thing happened that for a year, I would wake up to emails from people all around the world saying, I loved your book. How do I get more? And there was no more. And so after 12 months of getting those emails, that's when I finally decided, I don't really want to write another book, but maybe a podcast would be cool. Maybe that would be the next thing. And so I already had a built-in audience. I already could reply to all those emails and say, hey, I just launched a podcast. Here's the link. So it actually really not only gave me some of that confidence, but gave me that built-in audience to jumpstart.
That's amazing. You've helped entrepreneurs in over 150 countries. So what common mindset blocks or barriers do you see across the people you've interviewed?
Yeah, it's such a cool and interesting thing being an entrepreneur because it is the thing that exposes all of your insecurities, all of your self-doubt. It exposes so much because you have to put yourself out there. And I remember the first time that I ever got a comment on my soccer blog, and it wasn't the nicest comment in the world. That's just the nature of the internet and putting anything out there. And that really made me look inward and say, holy cow, like, do I want to expose myself to potential criticism, potential judgment? And so many entrepreneurs, that's the common thread in all of those examples is it's the first time in our lives where we put something out there and we don't get to choose. It's not a friendly environment. It's not a teacher who is looking to help us succeed. It's not a tutor who is helping us to make improvements. It's real life people with real life money and with real life needs and goals and desires and problems who are telling us whether they value or don't value the thing that we're looking to bring into the world. And so with that said, I think the biggest thing for sure is imposter syndrome is we make ourselves ask that question of, am I the person that can do this? Am I the person that should do this? And then even beyond that, I think a lot of the common threads that I see in the entrepreneurs that I interview is the concept of readiness. A lot of people trick themselves into believing that something happens, whether it be in life or whether it be in business, that all of a sudden they're ready to start their business. And the truth is, there is no one catalyst. There is no one moment where we're all of a sudden ready. It is that progression. Kind of like what we talked about with me starting my podcast is at episode 0, I certainly wasn't ready. Episode 1, I still wasn't ready. Episode 20, I still wasn't ready. Was I ready by episode 100? I don't know, because when you just keep doing things, all of a sudden you look backwards and you realize, wow, somewhere along the way I figured it out. And Nishka, I'll throw in one quick example that I really learned when my older brother had kids for the first time. So my niece and nephew, they're 7-year-old twins. And when I look back at my brother Michael's journey of becoming a dad and my sister-in-law Kristen being pregnant, and I think about them in their early 30s and I think, were they ready to be parents? Well, no, they weren't ready when they first got married. They had to be married, build that teamwork and camaraderie. And then, of course, Kristen was pregnant for 9 months and then she had the twins. And my brother, throughout that 9-month pregnancy, got ready mentally, got ready life-wise to become a dad. And the same is true in business, is that the journey is really the thing that prepares us. You have to do the thing in order to be ready for the thing. You can't study the thing, you actually have to do it and show up. And so it's all of those parts of the journey that really prepare us to be parents, to be entrepreneurs, to be ready for whatever endeavor we want.
What advice do you have for someone who's waiting for that moment in their life to come, is waiting to do the next thing?
Yeah, quite frankly, I mean, the best advice, it's my favorite Chinese proverb of all time, is that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. And it's a life lesson that my mom has really instilled in me since I was a kid. She still says it to this day, is the time passes anyways. And so to anyone who's listening to this that is stuck in waiting mode, that is questioning when's the right time to do it, the cool thing is I think about how many things in my life, like let's take learning a new language, and I think to myself, gosh, it would probably take, a year or 2 years, let's call it, to learn a new language. Well, that takes too long, so I don't want to start. Well, the truth is, a year from now, that time passed anyways. I will wish that I started a year before when I first had that thought. And so the time is going to pass anyway. So the time is either going to pass with you thinking, studying, analyzing, or the time is going to pass with you getting real life experience, whether it works out or not. That's the journey. That's where you're going to start accruing those skills. That's going to set you up. And I promise you, a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, you'll wish that you started all those months before, because you can't undo time. So hopefully this episode is that catalyst or that spark for someone to say, okay, this is my starting point. Let's go.
That's great advice, Brian. Thank you. You also have a nonprofit as well, right? Through entrepreneurship. So could you tell us about it?
Yeah, for sure. I'm super passionate about this because very clearly I love entrepreneurship, and I believe that all the best things in life happen through entrepreneurship. I believe that on an economic level, obviously opportunities, innovation, jobs, all of this stuff happens through entrepreneurship. And then even when we look inwards, personal development, growth, learning new skills, thinking differently, thinking bigger, ambition, persistence, all of these great traits that make us better people, we gain all of them through entrepreneurship. And so it's been a life dream of mine for quite some time to have a nonprofit and to launch a nonprofit. So in Q1 of this year, Q1 of 2025, we launched Through Entrepreneurship, which is a nonprofit dedicated to really 3 main sectors. The first sector is educating, teaching people at a younger age. I wish that I was introduced to entrepreneurship even younger, and that's why I love young entrepreneurs like you who are that shining example for so many others to say, oh, whoa, I didn't even know that this was a path. So education is one of our core pillars. The second core pillar is access to mentorship. I'm a big believer in that. If you have other people who will grab you by the hand and show you what they've gone through. I'm very fortunate that I had that from my so-called competition. When I started my first business, they really helped me. They accelerated. They gave me some of those beliefs that I didn't have on my own, and some of those skills and that confidence. So that's the second core pillar. And then the third pillar is really access to resources. We believe that nonprofits are uniquely equipped, where in the nonprofit world we can get access to resources, whether it's financial resources or the goodwill of others, whether it be large companies or small businesses that are looking to make their resources more accessible to others, to help others succeed, because again, we believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. So that's a little bit of the background on Through Entrepreneurship.
Well, thank you for sharing that and for sharing why entrepreneurship is so important. Well, could you recommend a book, podcast, or resource that has impacted your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, that's an easy one, because one book above all others absolutely has impacted my life and my entrepreneurial journey, and that is called The Magic of Thinking Big by Dr. David J. Schwartz. That book, I read it every single year. It's the only book that I read very reliably every single year without fail, and that book constantly, I'm highlighting new things, I'm folding over the pages because I want to refer back to it. And it just talks about all the real deep mindset stuff. Because, Anishka, as I'm sure you found when you've navigated the waters of launching a podcast and a YouTube channel, we can figure out the strategy. We can figure out the tactics. We're very fortunate to live in an age where information is no longer the barrier. And so that's why our biggest limiting factor has always been and probably will always be our mindsets. So that book, The Magic of Thinking Big, always gets me in the right headspace to believe and to think bigger and to do bigger and to have that confidence that we've talked about so much in today's conversation. So that's the real one that keeps me grounded and rooted in all the things that are possible.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Do you have any advice for how to lead a successful podcast?
Yeah, for sure. The biggest piece of advice when I think about podcasting as a medium, or I would probably apply this advice universally, whether it's a podcast or a business or quite frankly anything that someone wants to do. In life, we are taught so much about quality over quantity. When it comes to relationships, for example, we obviously want quality relationships over a quantity of not so great relationships. Well, the funny thing is that in podcasting or in business or in creation of most things, if you want to pick up photography, the truth is it's actually a quantity game. And so I'm a big believer that the more reps that you do at podcasting, at creating anything, the better that you inevitably get. And so in life, in school, we're always rewarded with that quality output, but in podcasting and in most other things, really you get rewarded through the practice, through the reps. And so a lot of people look for what's going to be the right microphone or the right podcast hosting platform or the right intro music or the right outro script that I can have. But the truth is, just record as many episodes as possible, put them into the world. I promise you, after 100 episodes, after 1,000 episodes, after 10 years, you're going to be so much better at podcasting than the average person that you're destined to succeed if you put your mind to it.
Well, thank you so much for that advice. I think this is a good place to wrap this up. So do you have any final words of wisdom?
Yeah, I guess to just add on to the last topic that we talked about with regards to reps, I think that that's something that we don't celebrate enough in society, in entrepreneurship, in school, and literally anything, is just celebrating longevity. Anytime you pick up an entrepreneurial magazine, we always see about those overnight success stories, those really fast growth trajectories that a lot of companies experience. But I think that the key to a great life, the key to great impact, the key to making a difference in the world is not to be a flash in the pan. I think it's really to show up over long periods of time. And the only way that we get to do that is to really tie in so much of our conversation today is to start now, is to start putting in those reps, is to start just hitting publish on more things, just putting more things into the world. And I think that internally, if we change our barometer of success from any sort of quick overnight success to, hey, I want to be doing this, not for just right now, but I want to be making an impact 10 years from now with the work that I do, with the way that I show up, I think that's the key to success in a world where it's easy to fall into the trap of metrics, but I think it's more valuable to really commit to that long-term sustainable success.
Well, thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for being here and sharing your incredible story.
Yes, thank you, Anishka, for all the things you do. I know how much work goes into it, and I'm so excited to see your journey from here.
Thank you.